Hey guys, it's Peter, and the podcast that I have for you today is a real gem, and it focuses on a subject that's dear to everybody's hearts, and that is the subject of relationships and love mastery. Now, if we had a pound for everybody that claimed to be an expert in relationships that then later got divorced, we'd probably all be millionaires. So, this is an ongoing topic of evolution that is a reflection of our own personal journey. But there's some things in this podcast that I really want to share with you, and it really also centers on how to focus on relationships, because energy goes where your focus is. And a lot of people, once they're in a relationship, they think the hard work is done. They focus really hard to sell themselves into being accepted by the other person. But now you've kind of closed the deal, you can take your foot off the gas. And that's where a lot of problems tend to start, with that mindset. So when you're really looking at how to improve relationships, one has to focus on them. Otherwise, it's going to atrophy or entropy. And therefore, you have a situation where if you really want to take it to the next level, you have to know what strategies to use. You have to know how to show up yourself. And that's really what I want to try and communicate during this podcast. So please take some notes. If you're currently single, this will give you a real good foundation for wanting to build your next relationship on top of. If you're in a relationship right now and you're really looking to take it to the next level, then this will give you some real good strategies and insights. And maybe you're in a relationship for the wrong reasons and you're planning your escape, in which case this will probably help you make some better decisions. Other than that, please sit back, enjoy the Raw Attraction podcast on love and relationship mastery.
Change the way you think about yourself and relationships forever.
Your weekly dose of mind-opening audio goodness starts here with the Raw Attraction Magazine podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Raw Attraction Magazine podcast. We are live here with Peter Sage. Peter is a well-known international serial entrepreneur who has a burning interest in everything to do with relationships, and as many of us do, realize that relationships are one of the most fundamental and important parts of our lives. He's certainly got many important things and views on relationships that he wants to share with us today. So, hello to Peter. How are you today?
Hi, Steve. I am absolutely fabulous, my friend, and thank you for the opportunity to come on the show.
No problem. And can you just start by giving just a bit of intro of what you've done and what you're doing in your life, and what kind of leads you to talk about relationships today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm well known as a serial entrepreneur, as a business guy, and the reason I've been very successful in business over the last nearly 25 years now as a fairly active entrepreneur is because at the age of 17, when I just after I left school, I got caught up in the whole industry of personal development. And for me, it was like, wow, you've got to be kidding. You mean there's an industry that teaches success? Now, where was that at school? That's what I wanted to learn, not algebra. And so as a result of that, my personal development journey started about, say, a quarter of a century ago, and I became a voracious learner. And what I noticed was that the more successful that I saw people in business, generally the worse their relationships were at home. And most people were following a pattern where they were chasing significance in order to qualify in their mind for a better level of connection. And of course, it wasn't happening. Most people get to the top of Success Mountain on their own and realize they want to jump off. Or, they think that now I'm all successful, people will love me, and they're still as empty as they were before. So if you're making $10 million a week in business, but your relationships aren't where they should or could be, then I don't care who you are, you're not happy. So really, the whole aspect of relationship for me started to unfold in parallel with personal development, because I thought I had all the right stuff, but I wasn't happy and I couldn't make my relationships work, even though I was quote unquote successful, or what I thought was a good catch and all that kind of stuff. And And really, it was a journey of emotional maturity for me to understand that there's so much more to relationships than pretty much any other subject. And if you don't get that one right, it's kind of like health. Most people don't oil the garden gate until it starts squeaking. Most people take their health for granted until something goes wrong. But without health, you've got nothing. But I would put relationships as a very close second to that, because you could apparently have everything, including health. And if your relationships or your intimate relationships aren't what they could or should be, then your level of fulfillment is nowhere near what the potential that we aim and strive for. So that's really what got me into the whole relationship side. I'm more known as the business guy, but relationships has been a passion of mine to understand and figure out, especially as it's cost me so many amazing and beautiful women over the years, and so much pain. I thought, if I've mastered everything else in my life, then relationships really should be the thing that I need to focus on.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's really what our magazine is about, where we want to re-educate. This is so much education that we've missed out on as just young adults, and children, and growing up. It takes many, many years to even learn some of the lessons, and some people may never learn till late into their lives. So it's time for that re-education to start now. For the listeners, it might be interesting just to hear, perhaps if you don't mind, some personal story in terms of where you have been with relationships. Have you been married? Do you have children? What happened in the last... What's your age now, if you mind me asking?
I'm 41.
Okay, so maybe you're a snapshot of the last 20 years of where you've been on your journey with relationships.
That's an interesting question, and quite a how can I put it? Quite a journey. As I mentioned, I figured out early on that as a sort of core, strong, masculine, alpha male type guy, I certainly appreciate and adore feminine connection. And from my profile in my early days, I thought it was all about what most guys, I think, initially think it was about, certainly from my era, which is, the more successful you are, the more you'll be liked. The more attractive you are, or the more the better car you drive, the more women will want to date you, and all of the fantasy bullshit that we tend to grow up with, and really it was a case of being so focused on trying to achieve goals on business, working 130 hours a week, 7 days a week, and just really making everything about me. So that I could, in a sense, cover up the insecurities as a young man of not being, or not feeling enough. We all have the primary fear, which is the fear that we're not enough. And ultimately, therefore, it leads to the fact that we're afraid that we won't be loved. And so, I don't know how many layers of the onion one needs to peel back to get to that truth or awareness, but it's always there. And so for me, relationships was a bit of a conundrum. I mean, it was always short term. I was petrified of making commitments. I was somewhat shallow in terms of I'm a visual guy, and I wanted good looking girls. And that it was quite a bit of a shallow Hal kind of time in my life. But
which age are you talking about?
Early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
But for me, it was business came first. My mission came first. That's what it was. And when I get to the end of that in my mind, then I'll be able to have time for this relationship thing. And therefore, it wasn't really that fulfilling on either count. Any girl that came across my path, or me thinking that I had a relationship. And I did have a long-term-ish relationship from the age of sort of 23 for about 6 years. But looking back, it was. It was a relationship in name only. I didn't really have a sense of how can I put it? Completion around it. It was a token. It was something that it was an accessory. No, I'm not talking about the lady. She was a great girl, but I'm talking about the relationship itself. And unfortunately, I think most people these days are more committed to the ship than the relationship than the passengers on the boat. So from there, into my very late 20s, I started to have a value shift, and it was quite a demarcation point in my life, because I went from being far more egocentric to it all being about me, to starting to understand that true fulfillment, and especially in relationships, comes from growth and contribution. That emotional maturity for men begins when they start to understand the value in lighting up their partner. And so I went through my sort of early 30s with that level of awareness, and really just I guess at that point exploring, learning, and getting it wrong enough times to try and want to get it right. And that led me up to a point where a few relationships later, I found myself living in Dubai, and I was living with a lady that in my heart, although I'd made a commitment to, I wasn't happy, and I wasn't happy because I felt like I should be able to figure it out. And I learned a lot from that relationship. What I learned was that I can only be responsible for my behavior. And if I'm being an asshole, somebody hold up a mirror, I'm happy to look. I class myself as a fairly decent, open-minded guy. My values are in place. But what I can't be responsible for are other people's insecurities. And I see this a lot. If somebody is having to be somebody else other than their genuine level of self in order to maintain a level of harmony or supposed fabricated harmony in a relationship, then that has a time limit on both sides. So for me, it took a huge amount of courage to leave that relationship. And really what it came down to was I went for a run one morning. I run on the beach in Dubai most mornings, and it gives me time to get clarity. And I'm running, and I got this flash of insight, this flash of clarity, crystal clear clarity about why the relationship wasn't working, why neither party was fulfilled. And I also got clarity around why there wasn't anything that I could do about it if I was going to maintain a level of authenticity about being who I am. I'm an outgoing guy. I'm a somewhat of an extrovert, and if I'm in an elevator with 5 people, then I'm going to start a conversation, and whether that's with 5 models or 5 football players, it doesn't matter. That's just a natural way of who I am. But if somebody else has insecurities around that, that their first boyfriend cheated on them, or their dad, cheated on their mum, and they're carrying their model of the world, interpreting their beliefs on that, then that's their deal. And as much as one can give levels of reassurance, and as much as one can look at one's own blind spots, because as long as you're not doing anything overtly outside of your values to trigger that, then that's, I would put that down to the fact that's just a compatibility issue on where people are at emotionally in terms of maturity. So I went back and I journaled. And I journaled for an hour, and what came through me, because I journal quite a lot, was such a distinct clarity of truth, because I'm sure there's people listening here who are either in relationships and unhappy, or planning to escape, or trying to make a relationship that's gone stale even back on the sparkling fairy dust that they want and know is possible. But you can be way too close to the trees to see the woods sometimes. And I read this journal entry that I wrote, and it was so slap in your face, stark truth outside of the perspective of being too close to see it, that I thought I have to come back and read this every day for the next 7 days from a different place, from a place of anger, from a place of love, from a place of frustration, from a place of apathy. And if every single time it still reeks of truth, then I know exactly what to do. And what made it hard for me at the time, Steve, was this, that my mother, this is 4 years ago, but my mother was dying of cancer at the time. And my father had recently passed away. I don't have any brothers or sisters. I've got no close family. My mum was my last living close relative. And she was happy because her boy was getting married. And I had to make a decision as to whether I was going to go and tell mum at a time when she was more or less on her deathbed that, I was calling it off. Because after a week of reading that and it saying it was true, I I came to the conclusion that, what am I here? What am I doing? Why am I here? Neither party is happy, and trying to fix it, even with the tools that we had, wasn't going to work. So it took a lot of courage. And I remember I flew to England and I went to see my mum, and I turned around and I says, "Mum, I've got to be honest with you, and this decision's been cutting me up to tell you, but I've just got to be honest. I can't lie. I'm single." And she looked me in the eyes, as only a mother can, and says, "I knew she wasn't the one." and what was tough about that, my mum passed away about a week later, and the hardest thing at that time was for me to prevent my then ex-fiance from coming to the funeral, because I knew that I was so craving love. I was so craving, having just lost my mum and had no other family. There was no one else to support, that I would have reconnected for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. And it was honestly one of the hardest things I've ever done, because obviously my ex-fiance, she loved my mum, and I said, "Look, I can't let you fly back from Dubai for the funeral," because I knew that it'd just taken a huge amount of courage to leave the relationship for the right reasons. But I would have connected in a heartbeat. I'd have connected with anything at that point. I was so desperately craving love and connection, and there was such a gap. But what happened there, Mark, is I made a decision at the time that I believe that one of the biggest challenges with relationships is that most people get involved with them for the wrong reasons. People get involved because they're lonely. People get involved out of convenience. People get involved because they're egocentric and they're looking to get something out of it. Many different reasons. But for me, if my identity at that time, and I class identity as one of the strongest governors of your behavior. Vegetarians don't eat meat not because they've got different teeth. It's because their identity is that of a vegetarian. Who you become, or anything you attach the words "I am" to, become a huge part of your personality and control a lot of your unconscious behavior as those habits ingrained. So for me to have the identity for the first time in my life, essentially, of being alone with no family, that was a big wound. And I knew that if I had a relationship at that point, I would be having a relationship for the wrong reasons. So when I went back to Dubai, I made a conscious choice that I was going to be single for at least as long as it took for me to be comfortable with the identity of being alone. And that was tough because, of course, I was craving some level of connection. But I also knew that if I was to put a relationship on that foundation, it wouldn't be fair to me, and it certainly wouldn't be fair to the lady that came on board thinking that this was something that had a future on the right foundation. So I chose to be single for about, turned out to be almost 2 years, until I was ready to say, something? Now that I'm comfortable with the identity of being alone, then I'm free to go and choose somebody I can spend my life with. And ironically, not long after that, I met the woman of my dreams. We've been together ever since. We live together now in Dubai. She moved in about a year ago, and I'm exceptionally happy. And I'm so pleased I not only waited and had the presence of mind to walk my talk and go through that level of emotional pain, to have the right foundation on which to build a relationship now. But also that, I've learned a lot of lessons over the last 10, 15 years that I can bring to the table from a complete perspective. I mean, of course, we're always learning. And of course, guys listening, you're never going to figure a woman out. Not completely. That's just part of the game. Accept it. Their base is too large. And if we're okay to live in the space of a question and be okay with that and just walk our truth and be as present as we can, then you're already ahead of the game. But that brings me kind of up to present day, and where I am now, as I say, very happily with a woman that hopefully going to spend the rest of my life with.
That's great. This is a great story. I want to know, and for the listeners, I think it would be interesting to know, how did you get to that place of strength and such self-awareness to be able to say, no, this a relationship now is definitely not right for me? What, for the people listening, what can people do to get to that place of realization?
It's a couple of things. Firstly, it's about walking your talk. it's everybody talks a good talk, and I teach relationship awareness and mentality and strategy, and I knew for a fact that if I was going to go and get a relationship now, as much as it would fill a huge gap in my life, it would be for the wrong reasons. The strongest trees grow in the strongest winds. If I couldn't walk my talk at that point, I have absolutely no right to present myself as any kind of authority on the subject. So part of it is being true to your values. Another part is having clarity around what it is you want. There's so much in relationships today whereby we are conditioned for instant gratification. In other words, it's a very egocentric model. We end up with a relationship that we think serves us, and we're in a horse trade essentially. I'll make you feel happy if you make me feel happy, and here are my terms. And so, without getting too deep into different levels of consciousness around that right now, for me, it was a self-realization that okay, here's a storm. What am I going to do? Am I going to cave in? Am I going to give in to the emotional gratification of wanting connection, or am I going to hold myself strong here, go through the pain, accept the fact that this is part of the journey, and hopefully come out of the other side of the tunnel stronger, wiser, more mature, and a better person for the lady I'll eventually be with.
I think clarity is one of the biggest points that you mentioned there, because it's the clarity that you've obviously got in your business world, in your business mind, that you've created all the things that you created, and I know you're doing some great things to do with space energy at the moment, which we might mention at the end. To take that clarity of what you want into your relationships is just as important, and many guys and possibly many women just don't take the same kind of clarity from what they want in their career to what they want in their relationships, and some don't even have it in their career, to be honest. But
I would say many.
Yeah, many. So how might we all get more clear and clarity of what we want? Is it about stepping away from fear? Is that one of the main things?
That's always a component, but let's drill a little deeper than that. Most people never take the time to unplug, to go away, quiet the mind and have an honest conversation with themselves to a point where they're not afraid of the answers. The challenge is, when even if we admit something to ourselves, it's almost like somebody else heard it. We tend to be the biggest self-justifier of actions that will lead us to emotional satisfaction or instant gratification, rather than say, something, no. I'm a great believer that the unchallenged person remains juvenile. And there's way too many adolescent relationships out there right now, and I'm talking about people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, that they're either running the same patterns, attracting the same kind of guys or girls, and then looking hopelessly at life, thinking, why does this always happen? And there's a good old phrase that says, if everybody you meet is an asshole, maybe it isn't them. And sometimes we have to literally sit in the mirror and say, okay, who do I need to become in order to attract the person that would most want to be with me? And that's not a conversation most people have with themselves from a place of honesty. It's a place of, okay, here's what's wrong with this person. If only they were like that, then we'd be happy. Oh, if only he didn't do this, then I'd be okay. And all that kind of stuff. No, it starts with us. Sit in front of the mirror. Go away. We're talking about a relationship that the most fundamental thing that you do next to breathing is, who you spend your life with. And that's the biggest determiner of happiness outside of your thoughts. So if you have a situation where you're not willing to give quality time to preparing yourself from a place of honest inquiry to have the relationship that you say you want, or even question yourself on what it is you want and why, Are you still trying to attract somebody that is a replacement for your father? Yeah, as many women do. Are you still trying to justify to your mother why you should never rely on a man, and therefore you've not attracted a decent one because you're too busy trying to be one? Are you treating girls like you saw your dad treat them, and therefore you have no sense of respect? Or you saw your dad abuse your mum, and therefore you swung the other side, and therefore you're so nice now, you attract a lot of roommates, but no one who's passionately looking at you like you're their king. Now, so it starts with an honest level of self-inquiry as to where you're at, and then what is it that you want, and then who do you need to become in order to attract the kind of person that you want. And if that's not worth spending time on, then most of us will get what we get and then start bitching and complaining about it.
But is it really as simple as just having a conversation with yourself? Because
have you ever had a conversation? That isn't simple. The honesty factor here, and asking the right questions and having the humility to get out of your own ego, is where the emotional maturity lies. That's what prevents it. To have the presence of mind to unplug from the day-to-day distractions that are so conditioned in 21st century society that we can't even hold silence for ourselves for longer than a minute without getting distracted. So to have a level of groundedness that we strive to be or strive to have, that would allow us to have that conversation. It's not a case of sitting there running the same patterns. Einstein said you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created the problem. And most people are creating the same relationship over and over again, with different people. And that's not about trying to find somebody different. That will never happen. It's about changing or raising your level of consciousness. And that comes through honest self-inquiry and the intention to become more than you currently are, and the willingness to own your own shit rather than blame everybody else for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's certainly not, like you mentioned just then, it's certainly not simple to come out of the distractions and the way of life that we live currently, to find the space for ourselves and really go deep, because we wouldn't see probably 99% of the suffering in the world if we all went much deeper inside and actually looked at what's going on with humanity at large and within ourselves, because we are all a reflection of humanity, and unless we all start to change our consciousness, it's not going to be good. So to find that space for ourselves is incredibly important. So it might be worth saying to listeners, perhaps what are other ways we can go deeper into ourselves. You mentioned you did a journal as well. Is there anything else you recommend?
Well, again, there's a distinction I'll make here between activities and techniques versus shifting the level of thinking. And I can put it, the willingness to give up the need to be right is, will get you far closer to being the person you want to be to attract a high level partner than it would journaling thoughts at the same level of consciousness around blaming everybody else for your stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I mean, and I'm not saying to people here you've got to become a saint or a monk or anything daft like that. I mean, this is 21st century life. We've all got mortgages to pay. We've all got lives to live and emails to reply to. You've got to combine a level of practicality with the spiritual quest. So, but it starts with the intention. Do I intend to make it a priority to understand the opposite sex better than I have done? Is it an intention for me to try and start giving up the need for significance and replace it with a focus on how I can put a smile on somebody else's face, not because it makes me score brownie points, but because it's the right thing to do? You're the kind of person that picks up litter in the park when nobody's looking. There's a different way of being able to approach and interact with life that'll allow you to grow and mature emotionally and spiritually into a person who will naturally attract somebody into their life that would be at a similar level. And what can you do? Look for role models. Read the the lives of people who you'd be happy to follow in the footsteps of as an example, not a warning. Take time out. There's, how much time a week do you invest in yourself versus running around on patterns of ego, trying to prove something to the world, trying to get approval, trying to win favor, trying to demonstrate you're better than everybody else, trying to win love, trying to fill in the blank. So, for somebody to turn around and say, something, this week I'm just going to make it a goal to appreciate people more. I'm going to make it a goal to be more grateful for the things I already have rather than complain about what I don't. This week I'm actually going to try on the cloak of humility. Even if it's for an hour, what would that look like? And start building up. It doesn't have to be sitting on a mountain for 20 years. But I guarantee you, if you aren't consciously seeking to raise your game when it comes down to being a better person, and a better person isn't the actions, it's the consciousness. Everybody can act in a way that's nice, but if you're doing it under the guise of trying to get something for it, if you're doing it under the guise of seducing yourself into thinking there's a hidden agenda that somebody then should reciprocate on, then it's the same car with a different coat of paint. What we're talking about here is changing the engine. From the outside, it still looks the same, but it's a completely different drive. So, there are many different things. I don't want to turn this into too much of a sort of spiritual conversation, but most people are so unhappy with their relationships and so willing to blame others for it that we never take the time to sit and look in the mirror and say, something? Maybe it's not them. Maybe, and like in my previous relationship I mentioned, as long as I was certain that what I was doing was in alignment and accordance with the values that I had at the time, and the reason that I was unhappy is that I was being squeezed into a smaller and smaller level of box so that I wouldn't trigger the insecurities of somebody else, then I can see it for what it is, and this relationship is not going to serve me and it's not going to serve them. It's time to move on.
Well, I think your point there about giving up the idea to be always right is incredibly important for people to take note on, and one important takeaway from this conversation. I think also to do with stuff you said there is the attachment to ego, especially for guys, and teen guys to 20s, 30s, is the attachment to beauty and our relationship to what beauty is in a woman, and how we're conditioned to some respect. Obviously, I think even babies have been shown what beauty is in photographs and stuff, and scientific experiments in terms of what we find attractive. But on a grander note, I think we have to look at our relationship to beauty as men, and our connection to love through the physical aspect of a woman. How might we look at that as a way to change the way we are in relationships with women?
You're opening up an entire, I won't say can of worms here, but an entire corridor of many other doors. And I don't know how much time we've got for the interview, but from my side, there's so many different angles there. Yes, we all find attractive what we find attractive. For the insecurities are the issues here. More than anything, women feel less than because they're not on the looking like the same as the cover of Cosmo, or the guys feel that women that are of a certain physical type are better women than those that aren't, or worth more attention. That's a whole 21st century manufactured level of bullshit. We can't help what we like. That's a given. And ladies listening, it's been proven several times. If a guy looks at a female form that he finds attractive, it has the same biochemical effect as taking blood pressure tablets to reduce his blood pressure. Nature knows what we like. Now, how he acts on that, or how he, what his intention behind that level of appreciation is a different conversation. If there's a level of insecurity there that you set up the rules that says that's disrespectful and how dare you, versus having an emotional, mature perspective whereby you appreciate female form and say, well, actually, yeah, she's pretty attractive, because your man is so present for you that his heart is where you're at, regardless of what he finds attractive. It's like going into an art gallery and saying, right, you're not allowed to look at these paintings because I'm jealous of them. I'm not planning on stealing the paintings. I don't make your painting less than, or don't appreciate your painting less than because there's others on. But that's a whole different level of conversation, and we don't have a lot of time to get into the levels of justification on there to make it less contentious. So that'll always be an ongoing level of cat and mouse for people who operate at a certain level of consciousness. Jealousy, give me a break. You can solve jealousy in one question if you allow yourself the ability to transcend the lower levels of thinking. And I don't want to come at this from a hierarchical perspective. That's not my intention. But there are certain levels of thinking and consciousness that are emotionally less mature than others. They're childlike. And you come down to something like jealousy, Steve, and ask yourself the question: what right do any of us have over who should or shouldn't love us?
I personally think jealousy stems, one solution for jealousy is just a better brotherhood. If we all connect to each other, man to man, and we have better relationships with each other, then there would be no jealousy. And the same for female relating. Yeah,
and esoterically, that sounds fine. But to set up a global brotherhood or sisterhood that has that in mind is not as practical as being able to turn around to someone and show them the insights to say, we should never have the right over who should or shouldn't love us. And what we've been seduced into thinking over the last, only very, very recent years is the fact that we have rights over other people. I have any rights over them. We're not a jailer. Anyway, if you're over 18 and it's not your parent, they don't have any rights over owning you. Case closed. That model came from a model of suppression, and most people listening here, I would invite to look at where the entire concept of marriage came from versus romantic love. Romantic love and marriage have never been together, apart from the last 100 or so years. Most people have absolutely no clue the history of marriage. And you go back 5,000 years from the Egyptians through to the Greek city-states 3,500 years ago and understand the whole context of marriage and how it came forward. Okay, it was hijacked by the Catholic Church as a way to be able to control union over people, but it was always about politics, union. It was always about economic security, strategic alliances. That's what marriage was. Whether you liked the guy or girl, or whether you didn't, had absolutely nothing to do with it until about 150 years ago, when the first marriages were based on the fact of freedom of choice after the Industrial Revolution, whereby things like village security, economic stability weren't as big a factors. In fact, prior to that, you would have been committed as insane if you wanted to marry someone based upon what we now call romantic love. So, this whole idea of romantic love, people just don't do their homework. And, if we turn around and say, I need to, the fact that I've signed a contract that makes me spend the rest of my life with you, irrespective of whether it's your truth or my truth, that isn't how to love somebody beautifully. Holding a space for somebody to honor their greatness, regardless of what they do, where they go, where they're at, and honor their truth. If your only right in life, Steve, is to walk your truth. And if you're blessed enough to have somebody walk their truth alongside you, then to be humbled by that and honor that. But it may be a point in the future where that is no longer either of your truth. And to say, well, in that case, I'm going to be unhappy for the rest of my life because I signed a piece of paper 20 years ago based upon an institution that I really know nothing about. I'm sorry, but that if you were to look at that from the outside in, it would be ludicrous. The irony is, the more you free up the ability or the need to want to own or control somebody, the more you hold a space to love them, the less likely they are to want to go anywhere else. But our mind won't tell us that if we're coming from scarcity. So, what gives us the right over who should or shouldn't love us? Nothing. We shouldn't have the right over who should or shouldn't love us. We only have the right to be the best us we can be. And if somebody is chooses to be with us along that for those reasons, and it's right, fantastic. If not, then who voted on the fact that I should be unhappy for the next 20 years and suppress myself rather than honour something which I didn't vote on? I know we're getting into a somewhat contentious area here, but it's having that level of inquiry that gives us a sense of perspective and clarity sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're obviously completely right. The way society and religion has framed marriage as this thing we have to do, and many of us have seen our parents' generation. I certainly saw my parents and my friends' parents just go through many divorces between the lot of them, and there's been really no education around what a partnership is. And like you said, if we're walking our truth and there's someone walking your truth with you, it doesn't that truth could last a month, it could last 70 years, depending on what feels right to you.
100%. And the Egyptians knew this. If there was children involved, then whoever the new father or the new partner of the mother would come in would honour that, and you'd also honour the fact that they had a different father and honour the access to that, etc. It was a very respectful level of society. There was no jealousy. There was no, I'm going to use the kids as a bargaining tool because I think you pissed me off because you slept with my best friend, and all this low-level bullshit. It was a case of understanding that who we are today are different people to who we were 5 years ago, and therefore we also know we're going to be different people 5 years from now. So how can you make a call based upon wanting to be with somebody 30 years from now when we're going to be completely different people? As I say, the only way that tends to stack up, the only way that tends to have a level of longevity is if you come from a place of being able to honour each other and honour each other's space and hold that level of respect for their humanity. Not, suppression and ownership and rules and bullshit. Chances are you wouldn't want to be with anybody else. And you've got a much higher chance of being together 30 years from now from that place than coming from a model that nobody here voted on. Nobody understands how it happened. It kind of just sort of clicks into place when you start dating somebody. There's this assumption that you now are meant to make me happy. You're not allowed to break my rules. There's unspoken dictates that if you break a non-negotiable, all this kind of stuff. It's all projections, all our own insecurities being brought to the table that we then project and blame other people for violating. It has nothing to do with unconditional love. Has everything to do with taking beautiful people and turning them ugly over time, rather than honouring your partner and lighting them up and finding new ways to love and adore them. And if they choose 10 years from now that this relationship is no longer their truth, to celebrate that, the fact that they've found that or discovered that at that time, and give them blessing to move on.
Well, there's so much we could talk about, and hopefully we may get a chance to do another podcast in the future. I think the next question would probably be like, how do we choose who to have children with is one, if we're so much choice out there, but perhaps leave that for another time. For those listening, how can they find out about your working relationships and what you're doing? You have a website, is that right?
Yes, actually. Obviously, I'm pretty much all over the web, but my own site is petersage.com. And there's some great resources on there. In fact, there's a great video talk on there on relationships that Glenn Moore did on the Sharing Your Passion series. And there's a lot of good stuff on there which we haven't had time to touch on here. But there's also one of my most popular downloads is on my Straight Talk number 9 on relationships. That's a 2-hour talk on how to take any relationship and make it magnificent. How to, if you're single, put yourself in the right place in order to attract relationships, and gives insights into understanding the dynamics and differences between masculine and feminine energy in a way that hopefully allows people better insight into the level of communication and honouring of each other's styles to hopefully allow for more love rather than less. So I've got a lot of free talks all over the web too. I encourage people, if they like some of the philosophy that I've got, go and look at my work. I've got work all over, say, on business, on making money without spending money, on relationships, on gratitude, leadership, many different subjects which I've I've had the privilege of being able to study and learn and experience from, and make a huge amount of mistakes in over the years. And if I have the ability to share that with somebody and they get something out of it, then obviously I'm very grateful and humbled by that.
Great. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of grateful people out there in terms of what we spoke about today and what they'll find from your information online. So thank you, Peter, for taking your time today.
You're more than welcome, Steve. Thank you again for putting on this medium for people. And yes, I look forward to speaking again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Raw Attraction Magazine podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please share it and spread the love.
Remember to go to rawattractionmagazine.com/download to get your free copy of the Raw Attraction Magazine.
Until next time, we wish you a loving, sexy, and intimate week.